Welcome back to another episode of the Waffle Press Retrospectives. We're talking about Avatar, the Legend of the Last Retrospective, where we're going to talk about all the Avatar shows and media. It's really just the shows and the movie adaptation, not the comic books and stuff, but I hear they're pretty good.
I've never, I've never read the comic, which is odd considering how much I like the franchise.
Yeah, no, I think I'm just at that point where, like, I'm done consuming, like, everything from a certain franchise, you know? Like, I burnt myself out. It's on me. It's not on Avatar. Avatar is pure and good, and...
Are you burnt out on all franchises, or just specifically Last Airbender, Legend of Korra?
No. I am not burnt out on these franchises. I'm burnt out on, like, the expanded universe concept, I think. Because, like, I still love Star Wars, even though we were not happy with the recent entry. I still love the Alien franchise, even though we've talked about it to death. Like, I have my stuff, and that's all I need, you know?
Yeah, some franchises, as disappointing as they are, I'm still into. And then the other is the Alien franchise.
Would you say you're still a Predator fan, though?
I mean, I think I've just watched Predator enough times.
And AVPR.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually one I want to read. It's like the two ones I want to watch again from both franchises are Alien 3 and AVPR. But I like the idea of watching any other entry in either franchise, like, just makes me, like, physically ill.
Oh, also, I'm your host, Diego Crespo. That's Macaringo.
Yes, I was about to say that.
We're not here to talk about those franchises. We're here to talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender, of course. And this season 1 version of the retrospective, we will be going over 5 episodes per recording for these. So, last episode, we went over... I'm going to pull up the list right now because I thought it was open already. That's my bad. The first 5, Boy in the Iceberg, Avatar Returns, Southern Air Temple, The Warriors of Kyoshi, and The King of Omashu. And today we're here to talk about Imprisoned, The Spirit World, Winter Solstice Part 1, Avatar Roku, Winter Solstice Part 2, The Waterbending Scroll, and Jet. And 2 of these episodes are again directed by Dave Filoni, who, Star Wars, important stuff there. But Chapter 6, Imprisoned. Matt, what did you think about this episode?
Well, I just hope everyone out there did their homework, because, again, this is a show that you should be watching. This is not something that just like, oh, I like this podcast with these 2 idiots, I'll listen. It's on Netflix, watch it.
At the time of recording, really quick, The Legend of Korra was just announced as also joining Netflix in August of 2020. So,
hey now.
Yeah, if you are keeping up with this podcast, make sure you keep up with Legend of Korra so you can keep up with us once we get there too.
I think the funny thing was, for the longest time, the only Avatar-related thing on there was the movie.
Really?
I think it was for a while. I'm not sure if it is anymore, but for a while, that was, like, the one on there. And, like Netflix plays clips automatically now, which is, like, the worst.
Yeah, it's so bad.
The clip they showed from it is, like, one of the most embarrassing clips from that movie. But, and I believe it's, like, one of the things that was lifted from... some of the episodes we're talking about today, because it's a lot of, like, earthbending shit. But hold on, before we go ahead, speaking of Netflix, are they still doing the live action series Avatar?
Just a heads up from future editing, Diego. Matt and I were obviously pre-recording these episodes prior to The Last Airbender creators removing themselves from the live-action adaptation of The Last Airbender. We're going to sound like buffoons talking about this for like the next couple episodes, and then eventually we hear the news that they are no longer involved with the Netflix adaptation. So just bear with us. Enjoy the rest of the show. We talk about it eventually. Thank you. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's why the Avatar duology has made its way there now. Yeah. Because I think Netflix is just going to, like, absorb the rights, because Nickelodeon is like, what do we even do with this? We tried to cancel it 5 times, and we finally succeeded. So.
Who wants that?
I don't know.
Yeah, like...
My theory is that it's a gamble to get the rights away from Nickelodeon because Nickelodeon is clearly just going to sit on them if they had them. Mm-hmm. And so this is like the sacrificial lamb, you know?
Okay.
But I mean, maybe it could be good. Who knows?
I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine if they just stick to the basic story of the franchise, you know? It'll just be weird retreading things that we've already seen. And I'm not sure this inherently works in live action. But we haven't seen anything out of it yet. But, yeah, it's just... I'm just like a little worried because it feels like... just to bring it back to our franchise talk at the beginning, one thing I'm worried about is that it feels like all franchises are kind of like in a weird reverting stage where they all like tried to grow a little bit and then faced such backlash, sometimes deserved, sometimes not. And now it feels like every franchise is going to be just like, well, how about we just tell the same story over and over again? And you want to be cynical and be like, well, that won't work, but it's worked for the MCU. Where about all those films are basically the same movie.
We've done such a good job of avoiding that topic of conversation for so long. And now you come into my house, into my place of peace.
I'm just saying, it's like a weird... And it's, again, we're like, I've said, like, you know, as much as I don't like Prometheus and Covenant, like, at least they're kind of trying something different. And I feel like all the wrong lessons will be learned where it's like, well, no, we got to just make Aliens Part 2. Which seems to be like the push everyone, not Ridley Scott, keeps making.
Yeah, God bless you, you doddering old fool.
Doddering old fool, Ridley Scott. But, yeah, it's, you know, and with Star Wars, we're kind of seeing the same thing. Where it's like they want to turn this whole thing where the marketing will tell you what the movie's going to be, and then the movie validates your feelings. And that's what movies seem to be turning into right now. It's a little concerning.
You know, let me just take a step back here. I think part of the reason why Avatar: The Last Airbender was such like an instant hit with audiences was because it didn't validate anyone's feelings. It told its own story and made people explore feelings that maybe they didn't really consider about classic stories like this. Because, you know, the structure of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the 3 seasons, it is like the structure of the Star Wars trilogy, right? It's the very simple hero's journey, but they color it in with more than just good versus evil and stuff like that. Like, they took the best lessons from Star Wars and did something wholly new with it.
Yeah, but there's a big difference when you're starting out, because like when Avatar: Last Airbender premieres, you have no expectations for it. You don't know what it's going to be. You watch it, you're either into it or you're not, and for whatever reason, a lot of people are into it. And I think it is for the reasons you're saying. But and it has nothing to do with like there's a million stories. Hero with 1,000 faces, all that monomyth bullshit, and. Like, so, you sit down, you watch it, and you like it, but I think it's that thing where if a franchise tries to grow, you have to grow, you have to change, you have to challenge yourself, and I think people show up to later installments going with an expectation, and then when they don't get it, they blame the franchise for not delivering on those expectations.
I can't imagine what you're talking about.
Yeah,
specifically.
I mean, but I don't even need this as like an example. That's like literally everything.
Yeah.
It seems to be the story that just keeps happening over and over again.
And then the problem becomes also that the money pushers behind this stuff is like, well, it made people unhappy, and we want them to keep buying our products. So how do we make them happy? And then they try to make them happy, and then no one's happy because you can't please everyone, and if your goal is to make certain people happy, it's not going to work out.
The lesson is that when that starts happening, if you're a franchise, you just have to ride it out, because they'll eventually fall to the wayside. Mm-hmm. That's just what happens.
I mean, like the Star Wars prequels have been kind of having like this renaissance a lot online, especially for our generation. Like. At first it was funny because of like memes, right? But now there's like a very sincere like reclamation of those films for people that really have an attachment to them because they saw them when they were younger, or they were really attached to like the ideas or the journeys that those movies go on. And so I don't know. I agree with you wholeheartedly. They just need to power through it, you know?
Well, I think the perfect example is like Star Trek The Next Generation, which when it premiered, it was like, fuck you. Like, everyone hated it so much because it wasn't the original crew, you know? Mm-hmm. And like the idea of like not doing it with like Kirk and Spock was like sacrilege. And I'm not saying those first few seasons of TNG are perfect. They are very much not. But they didn't suddenly like. There's a great documentary about those first few seasons, and I think the producer who took over in the second season proposed the idea of killing off the entire crew of The Next Generation.
Holy fuck.
And then bringing in a new crew that would replace them. Because he's like, these people clearly aren't, like, all the contracts are up, and he's like, and clearly people aren't liking these characters, so we should just get rid of them. And they didn't do that, and they wrote it out. And eventually, you know, now TNG is as popular as the original series. And I think you see that with every Star Trek series, even ones that like aren't perfect. Like even Enterprise has its fan base.
I'm not even making a joke here, does it?
It really does. It really does.
Okay. I haven't seen it, but that's cool to know.
By fan base, I mean I know one person that really defends it.
I know people that like the last season. I don't know if I'd call them fans of it. But
well, it's everything where it went for like 4 seasons, right?
Yeah, and the last one, they knew that was it, so they're like, let's just do whatever the fuck we want. And then that works until, like, the last episode, which is notorious for, like, trash. Being a disaster.
But I would say the last 2 seasons of Enterprise, like, the 3rd season, they really find their footing, and then, unfortunately, the 4th season was just the end. But, yeah, and I think there are some good episodes if you're willing to jump around. I think it's just like the disparity between the good Enterprise episodes and the bad ones are like the biggest in the whole series.
Yeah.
And also, it's like I would get into it. Like I sat down to finally watch like all the Star Treks like a few years back, and I would like be getting into Enterprise. I'd be like, wow, that was a good episode. I'm looking forward to the next one. And then you put it on, and it would be that fucking theme song.
Oh, yeah.
And it just, like, it puts you in the worst mood. It's like, that's the only time I will use the Netflix skip intro feature.
I would still power through it just because, like, I'm so against the Netflix skip intro thing. But I see what you're saying. It's so bad. I hate
it, but it's like, that's, like, every time it puts you in, like, the worst mood ever. And then, like, every episode, it's like, all right, win me back. Like... Which isn't fair, but it's like, you know, it's been a long road. Like, it's the fucking worst.
Oh, 2005. What a simple time you were.
Yeah. Star Trek had a real difficult time adapting to post 9/11 America. I got it in. I did it. Ring the bell. Ring the bell.
Oh my god, 2004/2005 when Enterprise ended is also when Avatar: The Last Airbender began. So there we go, bringing it back at the 13-minute mark.
And George Takei is in this episode.
Oh, he is. That's right. He's the prison warden.
He's the prison warden, and he's great.
Oh, he's terrific. Yeah.
This whole series, I would say, I think one thing we'll get into it more with Legend of Korra is that there's a little like too much celebrity voices going on in that one. Mm-hmm. But this is one where you'll be watching it and you'll be like, that voice sounds familiar, and you look it up and be like, holy shit, it's that guy.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about it, but Admiral Zhao, I did not know this until I rewatched it like a month ago when it first hit Netflix. That's Jason Isaacs.
I know.
What the fuck? That's
crazy.
Yeah, like, that is so cool.
I know, it's really crazy. Do you know who else is in this? Do you know what other famous actor is in this? Of these next 5 episodes, I mean?
Probably, but off the top of my head, I don't remember.
We'll get to it when we get to the spirit world. But anyway, Imprisoned. Okay.
It's a good episode.
Take a guess what this episode's about. Although, I gotta be honest, I remember this episode coming up. I remembered that they were in a prison. I remember George Takei being doing one of the voices in it. And for some reason in my mind, this episode stuck around as maybe we talked about last episode, like a filler episode. It kind of felt like a bit of a circular episode where, they end up in prison and then by the end they get out.
Mm-hmm.
But rewatching it, there was a lot more to it than I remembered.
Well, is it safe to say this is the first like big Katara episode where her dynamic isn't just related to Sokka and Aang, right? Like she's kind of the first character that gets to break out of the trio dynamic and really have her own story, and they're the ones that support her.
Well, arguably, this is her story as much as Aang's.
Yeah.
I mean, Aang has like the bigger journeys, but she, we start off with her, and she is the narrator essentially.
Oh yeah, that's right. Every
so
episode.
I think like a lot of the episodes, it kind of feels like she's almost like, I don't know if this works. Maybe she's either Mad Max and Aang is Furiosa, or you could probably reverse it and it would still work. But
yeah. I mean, she's in as many episodes as he is. There's no episode where they're apart. Also, or at least like not for like lack of screen time.
Yeah. There's only like a couple stretches where all the characters end up separated.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say this is one where she definitely takes center stage, in that she's planning things and making decisions.
And I want to give a shout out to Avatar because I completely never like realized this when I first watched it, of course, but like it's not an overt thing, but there are as many like romantic pairings for Katara, if not more, than Sokka. Like I know Haru, the earthbending character that they come across here, who Katara goes to save when she also gets imprisoned and the whole journey of the episode begins. It's not like a thing, but there's a joke about it later where a character says like they knew that Katara had a secret thing with Haru, and everyone's like, what? But did you kind of get the vibe that there might have been something there, or is that just me remembering that joke and kind of projecting?
I mean, maybe a little bit, but there's also like this is 5 episodes, and I think there are at least 2 pairings that Katara goes through.
So it's not just me, right?
I guess I've never been good at shipping characters.
No, like not even from like I want them to end up together place. Just like I'm remembering more and more of like season 1 Katara stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, she does get paired up with like characters that may or may not have an interest in her. And then in later seasons there's bigger stuff obviously, but like even then I'm like, oh wow, like this kind of does lead credence to the whole like this is also as much Katara's story as it is Aang's.
Yeah.
Not that romance is the only like driving factor for like a protagonist, but you know what I mean? Like there's a lot going on there, and she's a fully realized like young girl who has as much agency in her romance as she does like in defining her own like adventure and journey.
And romance ends up being a big cornerstone of this series. I think that maybe doesn't come ahead until the final few episodes of the first season, but it certainly becomes an overarching thing.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I don't know. I think part of it is that one thing I really like about this show is that there's so much just wordless animation where they let the visuals tell the story, which seems to be something that like every network and studio pushes back against like really hard. So like a lot of it is like you just have to read the emotions on characters' faces. And I think that allows for more bonds between characters that maybe aren't explicit, but like there's some subtext too.
That's so funny that you mentioned that. So Roger Deakins has a podcast, and I shouldn't recommend it because, quite frankly, it's like the best thing I've ever listened to because it's Roger Deakins and his wife having a podcast. But anyways, they talk with a lot of other filmmakers and like people in the industry that they've worked with, and they got their whole little team, right? And a big part of their discussions with all the animation people that they have on, because their team has been very, like, involved with a lot of DreamWorks productions lately, right? And they're working on a Pixar thing. And the big, like, point of confrontation they always bring up is the wordless animation and, like, removing light sources. Because with animation, you're like, well, you're animating it, you want to see it. We're spending money on it. We need it to be, like, constantly happening in front of the audience as often as possible. And because they're, like, smart filmmakers, the Deacons, they're like, no, it's not always, like, what you need to do. Like, sometimes less is more. Sometimes the story speaks for itself once you, like, watching it and hearing it and, like, engaged with it. You don't always need something verbally or audibly happening to the audience for it to tell the story. And so,
Well, I think it's something that, I mean, Avatar is kind of like, there's always that debate about, which I think maybe no one has anymore, but there used to be that debate about whether or not The Last Airbender was quote-unquote anime.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is definitely heavily inspired by Japanese media and Japanese animation, but I think it's also as inspired as, like, Japanese films, and I think, like, the master of just, like, wordless scenes was, like, Kurosawa, where he would let, you know, weather and tell the emotions of a scene, and in a show where people are literally bending the elements around them. I think maybe lifting some elements from that guy probably help a lot. But I have a question. How does Deacon's podcast compare to the other recently launched Russo Brothers Pizza Film School podcast?
I haven't listened. Don't feel like I'm missing out, if I'm being honest.
Which one do you think's getting more views?
Don't do that. don't say something like that.
They apparently had Josh Brolin on recently to talk about No Country for Old Men. And Mark Hamill to talk about Empire Strikes Back.
Of course they did.
Yeah.
Of course they did.
I'm sure he's excited to talk about that more.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to talk about, like, the opposite.
I know.
And I don't even hate those guys. It's just like, you know, yeah, like that's like a McDonald's hamburger.
Yeah, you know what? Then, to their credit, I rewatched The Winter Soldier. I still like that movie a lot. I'll never watch anything else they do, like, ever again, but that one I thought was still held up pretty good.
I would like to see, because they have, like, an original thing coming soon, I would like to at least check it out.
Yeah, I think that's like going to be the litmus test for them. Yeah.
I feel like there was Winter Soldier works because they had less, like, boxes to hit than their other films. Mm-hmm. And they were, I mean, to give them credit, they were pretty good at jumping through the insane hoops that the MCU required them to jump through. Like, better than most people probably would be, but that still, like, didn't make the films good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. But the Deacons podcast is great, and anything you listen to after that, except for this one, of course, becomes, like, marginally less interesting. So just
all right, that's a, you know, well, I mean, I think that will be a good podcast to listen to, and then come back to this and realize how big of frauds we are.
No, it is like it is such a sincere, like, podcast and very informative. Like, it's like every episode is like an hour-long masterclass, and then you're like, oh yeah, no one else understands anything ever. But anyways, Imprison's a really good episode.
This isn't the Roger Deakins podcast. This is the Avatar, The Last Airbender podcast.
Legend of the Last Retrospective.
I will not remember that.
It's a legend. It's not that hard. I just wanted to show respects to Korra, because Korra doesn't get enough respect.
You know what I didn't relate to at all from this episode today was secret police coming in and arresting people.
Yeah, no, this show hits differently in 2020.
I gotta be honest, I will say, it definitely hits differently now, but this is the best idea we've ever had. Because it is a highlight of my day watching the show again.
No, honestly, I've been very open about how much I've rewatched this show. I know I'm going to watch it like a dozen more times over the course of this retrospective alone. Just because it is very politically, like, charged, but also it just makes me happy.
Yeah. So,
the Fire Nation is obviously, like, the stand-in for, like, just imperial nations. Like, it's not subtle. It's the point of the show, you know?
Well, I mean, I think they're the most, like, explicitly Japanese-influenced civilization, you know? A lot of the different nations on the show are inspired by different Asian nations, but they're more explicitly Japanese, and you can kind of see it as like Imperial Japan era.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look up like, you know, ships from the Russo-Japanese War era, and they look a lot like Fire Nation ships.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely. There's definitely some imperialism overtones to this, and you get why there's kind of been like this weird retreat in the show where, especially over the course of these few episodes, where bending has been outlawed in Fire Nation occupied areas, and that's why some people just consider that sort of stuff just magic, as opposed to like an actual just common thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of contrasting it with later when we get to Korra, but I'll save that for that talk. You also get the weird, I don't know what the term would be, because it's not racism, but almost like eugenics-y talk coming from Takai's character, where he talks about how the like earthbending is like a filthy art.
Oh, yeah.
Firebending is like true and real and natural.
I would say that, yeah, eugenics are like at least like the ultimate form of bigotry. So eugenics is probably right.
Well, I mean, it's like a perfect example of like any imperialist nation will make up bullshit to like enforce their ideology.
Mm.
I mean, it's skull shape, you know. It's like all that nonsense.
Yeah.
Of like, the perfect skull shape for the Aryan man versus the other groups. And it's like there's, you know, the only difference between the different bendings is like what element they manipulate, but they're essentially the same thing. You know?
Yeah, like at their core, it is still just being in tune with like their own identity and their place in the world. Like that's the whole thing about like balancing the elements, and like the Avatar is an important reminder for people about that. And
well, it's also like
it's pretty astounding stuff for a show like this.
And it shows why the Avatar being gone for 100 years has really like put up these walls between the different groups, because he's like the force that brings the different elements together and they quote unquote live in harmony. And the Fire Nation has exploited this lack of unity to enforce like their dominance.
Yes. Sorry.
I don't know. I thought I had more too, but I apparently didn't.
Oh, okay.
Katara getting herself captured is pretty funny.
Oh, yeah. Earthbending style. And then, of course, you get the wonderful little Momo moment.
Yeah, they think Momo is doing the earthbending. Which is
I love
funny.
Momo. I know Appa's everyone's favorite, and I get that. Not to take anything away from Appa, who was also great. But I just love Momo so much.
And they're both voiced by D. Bradley Baker, right?
Yep. D. Bradley Baker, the god.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that dude is like just infinitely talented with voices.
Yeah, that's frightening.
Yeah.
Frankly, it is a disturbing talent.
But yeah, they get to basically just stage a prison break this episode, and I don't know what it is, but I always with adventure type shows or like genre stuff, the prison break stories I noticed, at least for live action, tend to come later in the series.
Yeah.
But no, this is episode 6, and this is right off the bat. Like, The Flash waited for, like, season 4 to do a prison arc, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's The Flash. It's not like they were, like, holding on to any more good ideas at that point anyways. Sorry. But, like, I don't know. I did not remember this one coming this early, honestly. So that was a pleasant surprise.
It was, too. And I almost thought, like, that's why I kind of was, like, I didn't really remember much of this episode. Like, I thought maybe it was like a more throwaway one, but there's a lot of like, you know, meat going on here. And it's usually because prison arcs and prison episodes, I kind of always feel like we're moving a lot of different pieces around. We have to keep certain characters in one area for a long stretch. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And you can do a lot with it. You can do a lot with a prison story, but it almost feels like kind of grounding. It can ground stories to a halt if you don't do it right.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't hate The Dark Knight Rises, but that movie definitely has a pacing problem.
Yeah. I love Dark Knight Rises, but I agree the pacing's very odd in that film in particular.
And it's like, oh, he's in a hole for most of it.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, whatever. And it's interesting to see when they get into this prison and it's full of earthbenders and they're all kind of just like, they've all given up. You know, it's like, again, like more evidence that this war has just been going on forever. Mm-hmm. And you're like, look, we can't really plan an escape. Like, all we can do is just keep everyone comfortable and hope it ends one day. Which definitely rings weird right now.
Oh, boy, does it.
Yeah.
But also, just in context of the Avatar universe, that each of these episodes are like designed to showcase like a different aspect of the world and like the way society's kind of like falling apart because of the 100-Year War, you know?
Yeah.
And like the fact that these are all people from different villages in the prison too kind of makes it more terrifying that it's not just a Haru's village that they're kind of gonna liberate at the end of this, you know? Mm-hmm. That there's a lot of work to be done, and the Avatar can only do so much of it. It really is about, like, you know, like the whole idea about the bending isn't just like that the Avatar has to save the world. It's that he has to save like people and spread that message so everyone can play a part in bringing balance back, you know?
He has to restore hope.
Yeah. Which is Katara's favorite catchphrase and a great meme.
The spark that lights the flame for the new rebellion. As long as
I'm not upset about that
up in the next movie.
Oh. Well, anyways, that was a good episode.
Yeah, it's good. You know, they break out. It's fun. It's a nice little prison break. It's also like that good thing of like one thing that's been crazy about recently is, you know, like when you're a kid and you like ask a question about like why something's fucked up in the world,
mm-hmm.
and then your parents just go, well, that's just how it is, and then like you go, oh, but then you just like sit with like it doesn't sit right with you for a long time,
mm-hmm.
and then you start, as your generation starts to grow and accumulate some standing, you realize, oh, we can actually fight to change that thing people say can't be changed.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, maybe breed some tensions with the older generations, because then you're kind of looking at them being like, what the fuck were you doing?
Uh-huh.
Turns out we could have just done this like fucking 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I mean,
food for thought.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's kind of what is embodied in Katara with kind of her, like, almost like naivete, which is, you know, sometimes that ends poorly for her, but also sometimes it helps.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I wouldn't even call it, like, full-on naivete. It really is just a show that, like, you have to believe in something and be willing to lose a couple fights because they're fights worth fighting for, you know? Even if other people tell you no. Which she gets a lot. Like, that's like her whole, like, arc in the first season. Everyone telling her no a lot of the time.
So let's move on to Chapter 7, The Spirit World.
Well, technically, The Winter Solstice Part 1. Now, this is weird because I was reading the titles off of the Wikipedia, but, like, on the episodes on the Blu-ray and on Netflix, I believe, it's Winter Solstice Part 1 and then The Spirit Worlds like as a subtitle. And I don't know why they switch it up. This means nothing, but I just want to know why they switch it up on the different formats. So,
well, you ultimately you don't even need winter solstice nonsense. But hey,
yeah, no, I mean, if I was writing a show, I would want like as many part 1, part 2, part 3s as possible, just because I think that looked kind of cool.
I guess.
Yeah, like that's what I would do. You don't need it, but that's what I'd do. And
talk about something I didn't remember getting introduced this early was the whole concept of the spirit world.
Yeah. The show doles out information like relatively quickly, and I think that's also why it does so well with people, is that it doesn't hold back its punches with its story.
Yeah, it's like they trim the fat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like what's that Elmore Leonard quote? R.I.P. to the king. But he says like he writes stories without the parts that people tend to skip. Mm-hmm. You know, and if you've read any of his books, that's kind of true. And sometimes you do wish they went on a little longer, but that's okay. He's still great.
You can get through his book in a plane ride. That's always nice.
Yeah. Underrated talent. And and so this is the first instance of the Avatar and Sokka and Katara coming across spirits, of course, but also where the main conflict isn't just saving a town. It's realizing that, the Earth is like in pain because of this war. You know, like you're seeing the ripple effects, like, which is kind of cool to follow up the Imprisoned, because you're seeing the effects it has on like lower class citizens in this world, and also like the actual world itself. You know, it's I don't know. That was really a sentimental way to open this, I think.
It's Koyana Scotzi, Life Out of Balance.
I've never seen that.
You don't need to.
Oh, I've heard it's really good.
It was probably good in 1982. The Philip Glass music is pretty great.
Oh, okay. Is that like, not to get into a whole thing, but like Jean-Luc Godard?
I mean, yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
I just think a lot of there's a lot of filmmaking techniques that were pioneered by Koyana Scotzi that have now just become like a regular thing that like every movie uses, especially in montages. It's kind of interesting because it's a tone poem. It's also 90 minutes. You'll probably like get something out of it, but I don't think it's like a masterpiece or anything. But that's just me. Some people worship that shit.
All right.
But yeah, this is a little bit was reminding me of Princess Mononoke, the Miyazaki film.
Oh, big time.
With the forest spirit, because they come across the forest that has been burned down by the Fire Nation, and that has of course created an evil spirit. Because if I don't know enough about like Shinto mythology or anything like that, so I'm probably gonna get a lot wrong. But there's a part of belief that like everything has its own energy, its own spirit, and so like if you destroy it, like that energy has to go somewhere, and that's what can create like bad spirits and good spirits. Or in Spirited Away, they have to go to a bathhouse to relax every now and then. So Aang has to deal with this enraged spirit now that his forest has been burned down. Also, the elder of this village was voiced by Mr. Takagi from Die Hard.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I was like, that voice sounds familiar, and I looked it up, and it was him.
And father of 5. Everyone go watch Die Hard. It's just as good as you heard.
They worked out better for him this time.
Oh, significantly.
Than in Die Hard.
And this is also the first conflict the group comes across where they can't punch their way out of it, which is also something that tends to be held off for long-form adventure series. Well,
it's so weird. It's a surprisingly complicated mythology, but again, like, yeah, they dole out the information in like the perfect way, where like they know exactly when to reveal different things, because it's like, you know, you're in a world where it's like, all right, there's air bending, there's earth bending, there's fire bending, and water bending, and you're like, cool, and it's like also there's like this whole spirit realm, and you're like, what? And, like, it almost feels like too much at a minute, but like it does like flow together perfectly. And Aang travels, like, crosses that barrier into the spirit world a little bit. And I believe he doesn't take, he calms the spirit in this episode, right?
Yes.
Yes, but before he does that, he is contacted by, it's not the spirit of Roku, but was his companion. He rode a dragon like how Aang rides Appa.
Mm-hmm.
And this dragon takes Spirit Aang to like a temple or fortress in the Fire Nation, and they basically have to get there by winter solstice. It's like this whole, which is another thing that, like, now we're building in, like, oh, the alignment of the planets and the seasons are also important. I mean, that's a lot. It could spin out of control really quickly, but they keep it together very well.
You know, I've talked about how I've been also rewatching Community recently, and this isn't out of nowhere. Just hear me out.
Dude,
shows that I'm really drawn to.
Before you go into your thing, I am not the person who's going to come at you for going on tangents. That's you coming at me, because I do go on tangents. It would be hypocritical of me to be like, what does Community have to do with this?
Well, my whole thing with TV shows that I'm really drawn to are the ones that can have an overarching story, but also, like, let's say half an hour to an hour long, are good at telling their own contained stories, whether or not they feed into, like, an overarching narrative, you know? Like, I think people forget a lot, like, with how TV's done nowadays, that, you know, sometimes it's just nice to have a sub-story in the midst of a larger story, you know? Like, all the pieces can come into play in a way, and Community's really good at that. And Avatar: The Last Airbender is like phenomenal at that. Like, how many HBO shows, you know, God bless them, with a lot of the great stuff that they have over there, how many of them just, like, have episodes that don't really even have, like, a beginning or an end? They're just kind of like the middle of something,
especially
you know?
now.
Yeah, like,
where everything is kind of made for streaming.
Yeah, and, you know, like, everyone, like, ragged on, like, the last couple seasons of Game of Thrones, and, like, I agree. But, like, there were problems in, like, the middle of that series where it's just, like, you're watching stuff and you're like, wait, what happened in that time? Like, why did we do any of that for 40 minutes?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's just a cautionary tale, I guess. It's a problem I have a lot with a lot of modern television, and it's also just nice to have structure again.
Speaking of, like, stories, like, within stories, like, all these different layers, is, like, think about, like, Avatar Roku, whose spirit we meet in the following episode, which we can probably just, like, segue into. Like, he has a whole arc on the show, and he's dead. Like, all this shit happened, like, now it would be over 100 years ago in the show's time. But he's got, like, also this, like, really complicated, interesting story going on, which only is partially revealed in this episode.
Yeah.
Which is this is where Zuko comes back in and is chasing him through the blockade. He's also being chased by Zhao or whatever. A lot happening here.
Yeah, and I mean, like, Admiral Zhao is not, like, a super complex villain, but there's a lot going on with just, like, his whole pride factor about, like, like, he needs to be victorious over this teenage banished prince.
Yeah.
And that's, like, that's telling. That's very telling for that man. You know, it's like, he's Commander Zhao at this point. And, like, what does that even matter to him? Like, why does he need to be victorious over this dude who no one cares about while still chasing the Avatar too?
It speaks to the mentality that most Fire Nation soldiers must have, you know, after being instilled for a war they've been at for over 100 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something that would probably happen.
Yeah, and once they reach the temple in the Fire Nation, because every nation, the water, earth, air, and fire, each one has a temple for the Avatar to connect with, like, the spirit world and their past lives and stuff like that I really like, because it's a reminder that that all these things should be in balance, right? And when they get there, that even though most of the Fire Nation people there are, of course, enemies that they have to like defeat and like fight, there's at least one of them that's there to actively help them. And it's the first instance of, hey, not everyone who's in the Fire Nation is bad. Some people are just struggling to kind of figure things out on their own.
There's a bigger story going on here, basically. I mean, it's telling, which again they don't really go into it a lot, but the fact that the previous Avatar was from the Fire Nation, like you can already read a lot into that without knowing enough. It's exciting. Just like the little bits of information that start kind of coming out, even if you don't always see it coming.
And this is also the episode where Aang discovers he needs to defeat the Fire Lord before the comet arrives.
Before we go into that, I want to talk about I really like how they get around the gate that is keeping the where Aang has to go to communicate with Avatar Roku. Where they basically have to trick the guys into thinking that they use their fire bending, that they found a way to get inside.
Yeah.
Which is really creative. I mean, because it rides like this whole thing of like, oh, we can't open it without this help, and then it's like, well, what if we use these explosives? And they're like, that should work, and then it doesn't. But then like they can build on top of it to be like, all right, we can trick them. And it's good building on top of each other that I really liked.
Yeah, it's writer Shane Black also has a lot of notes about stuff like that, where let's say in the script, the guy's falling out of a plane. Oh no, that's bad. Well, he has a parachute. Okay, that's good. No, there's a hole in the parachute. Oh, that's bad. No, it's okay. He's gonna land in the haystack. Okay, that's good. No, the haystack's on fire. Right? Like it's just constantly like reversal payoff, and I think it's also why the Avatar structure of episodes is really good, because every episode is filled with stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do. That's way easier said than done. But it leaves it constantly like a joy to revisit and to watch. And it goes to show that Sokka's not just he's not just like an airhead. He's like actively trying to like become a better like leader and warrior. That I really admire.
Yeah. And like you said, this is where we kind of get positioned as the big bad, the Fire Lord. And we're also introduced to this concept that when there's a comet that's going to return in like a year, I believe he says.
At the end of summer.
Yeah. So just under a year. And if it returns, it'll give the Firebenders like immense power, and it'll be enough for them to conquer the world. And of course, if they conquer the world, that means the end of the world, probably. So now we got like a ticking clock element, which will hang over the whole series for a while. So now it's like, all right, Aang really has to start learning all this different bending.
Yeah, it adds a momentum that the series didn't really have in the first 6 episodes, and not that it even needed it, because we're just kind of settling into everything. But this is where the show kind of really starts taking up a couple notches.
Yeah, well, now the stakes are so much higher. Whereas it was mainly just like a good versus evil. Like you'll defeat the Fire Nation eventually, but there's no haste. And now it's like, no, you got less than a year. Good luck, idiot.
Yeah. And then just like cut to like Aang doing like the look what I can do, and just like spinning around those little balls in his hands. Is that it for that episode?
I like, other than like Zuko kind of like being on their trail, and like he almost catches Aang at one point, and then Roku's spirit is able to take over Aang and like banish all the people, and they escape.
Oh yeah, and the temple burns down. Oh, you know what? This is something that I never see really discussed here, but when Avatar Roku's dragon is flying Aang to the temple, this is when Uncle Iroh is caught by some earthbenders, and he sees the dragon flying Aang.
Oh yeah, that was this episode.
Yeah. And we get to see the bond between him and Zuko grow a little bit more, and how Iroh is not just an oaf.
Yeah. Well, we're also we see that he's a lot smarter than he lets on, but we also get the first piece of information that like you could logically deduce he is the Fire Lord's brother, of course, but then he's also like this disgraced general.
Mm-hmm.
That at one point he was like considered like really tough, and then now like everyone just considers him a loser, which is why he's basically just guarding his nephew.
Yeah. And then I think that's it for that episode. But yep. I like that element. Just
next episode,
weed in stuff.
Next episode, pirates.
Yay!
We have a bunch of pirates.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Good for
Jack
you.
Sparrow.
In this one,
Keira Knightley.
They
Hans
find
Zimmer.
They find a waterbending scroll. And Katara fucking straight up steals it.
Katara said, "Fuck 12."
It was, hey now.
Sorry.
Did they ultimately decide stealing is wrong?
In this one?
Yeah, I think they maybe just decide, like, hey, give us a heads up if you're going to steal something.
Yeah, I think it's up in the air if they're pirates. And we do start to see, because, like, symbols of like traditional authority in Avatar up to this point, they're not like antagonistic unless they're from the Fire Nation. But as the series goes on, the rules start getting a little looser because, it's clear that just because they're an adult, they're not in the right in the show, and also in real life, just for the record.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, they steal this waterbending scroll because now it's like, all right, Aang really has to learn to master the 4 elements. You might as well start practicing waterbending now, even before we get to the Northern Water Tribe.
Yeah.
And that was actually something I looked up because I was a little confused about the path they took. So I looked up a map online that like followed their journey. It actually makes sense.
Oh, really does it? I haven't looked at that because that's a question I've actually had.
I don't know if like they retroactively like move things around, but they're literally like traveling right along the border of the Fire Nation and the Earth Nation.
Oh, I see.
Which maybe isn't the smartest way to travel, but it's probably the quickest. So.
Yeah, I mean they're like what? Aang's 12, Katara's like 13, and Sokka's 14. They're allowed to be a little dummies.
All right. And this is where there's a little bit of tension between Katara and Aang, because Aang, being the Avatar, is able to master everything, like, immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And Katara has been, like, struggling her whole life, because she's had no teacher, and had to learn most of it herself.
Yes.
Alright, I'm not sure, not a lot happens here. It's more just, like, a fun episode of falling in and out of traps.
Yeah, and I think that's something I want to highlight too. Just no episode of Avatar up to this point is really just like a fun throwaway thing. There is always something going on, even if there's not that much to comment on. That's probably why we can bundle a bunch of these into single recordings.
Yeah.
But it's good stuff, and personally, I just like the random villains that they get like tossed into every once in a while with these stories. Like I really like the pirate setups. Like they all have like individual like designs and personalities too.
Yeah, and I think this is the only episode they're in. I could be wrong.
You are wrong, and
okay.
I will not spoil when they're in it again.
How much are they in? Are there only one other episode?
Yeah, only one more episode.
Okay, because I just wouldn't remember that. But yeah, I don't know. It's very I don't know where I was going with that. There was no thought at the end of that. Although I know, just bring me back to my Tumblr days. I remember a lot of people used to ship Zuko and Katara a lot. I remember seeing a lot of that.
In this episode,
and this is the episode where he kidnaps her at one point. So if you like a bad boy out there, this episode probably you'll get some points out of that.
Dante Bosco also wore a Zutara shirt one time.
I know.
And boy, did Tumblr never forget that. Shout out to Dante Bosco, who's very good at voicing Zuko.
He's very good.
And then, that's kind of it. Then they just, like, end up escaping. And But there's a really fun action set piece at the end of this before we move on, where everyone's just kind of trying to gain one up on each other.
Yeah.
Where, like,
there's boat chases and shit going down the river, and everyone turning on each other, and everyone just fighting each other.
Yeah. Oh, and there's this hilarious bit where Sokka and Aang can't fight each other in like this dusty fight, and so Aang's like, "Hang on," and he separates all the air, and then everyone's pointing knives at him, and then he's like, "Whoops," and just like brings it all back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That kills me every time.
Yeah, and speaking of that scene with Aang, I think this is something why live action is kind of stacked against this series, because animation allows them to do such like smaller things where, you know, Aang never just gets up from a chair. He like always uses his airbending to like lift himself. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's something that would be much harder to do in live action.
It's also just less visually interesting, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, this show has such like a bold, specific color palette through like each of its parts of the world that it journeys through, that you can do it in live action, but one, that's already so expensive, and two, you really have to push the hardcore fantasy elements of it to really make it like believable and not just like digital artistry.
They should make it look like something like House of Flying Daggers, you know?
Oh my god, yeah.
But I feel like it's going to end up looking like how every movie after The Dark Knight has like those washed out colors.
That would... Oh, no. If they do that, that would break my heart.
Yeah, I just feel like, because that's just easier and cheaper.
I know.
But, maybe. You never know. You can always hope.
Yeah, I mean, like, if some portions of the world look like that, that would be, like, appropriate because, you know, 100-Year War and all that. But, like, if that's the look of the show, we're going to have problems. So
yeah, like just hopefully like they get to like capitals and stuff, like those are at least more colorful, like Ba Sing Se or something like that.
Yeah.
But we will see how this is handled. It would be great if they ended up turning in like a Lord of the Rings caliber adaptation, though.
Oh, that would be so cool. Or like Guillermo del Toro's mythical never-made Hobbit film.
Yeah.
Because that was also going to like implement a lot of like additional digital photography to like make it more fantastical, you know, especially like with the skies. That was going to be a big thing. They were going to like basically sugarcoat the skies with like nebulas at night and stuff like that. And I don't know. I read about that all the time, and it just breaks my fucking heart.
The only way though is if he didn't shoot it in high frame rate.
No, I don't think he was planning to.
All right, good, because that was like the big thing that like fucked that whole series.
Not to get into the whole Hobbit thing because we only have one more episode, but like it is kind of funny that like there's like this whole debate about like the Star Wars prequels versus like the Hobbit, Lord of the Rings prequels, and it's like, oh yeah, like they both push technology forward, and it's like, yeah, but like Star Wars did it like for the entire medium. Peter Jackson was like, wouldn't it be cool if we just
Star Wars like actually like brought a bunch of stuff that was like implemented everywhere, and The Hobbit is like a textbook like example of like, don't do any of the things we did. Like it basically killed high frame rate. Like
even though it should have like blown up Gemini Man to like the $1 billion hit it deserved to be.
Yeah, no. But I think Gemini Man is probably a better use of it than, because like the big problem ended up being like all the visual effects shots now like took double the effort to do. Like that's where they like fucked themselves. There's this really sad image. I can't find it anywhere. I think it was on like one of the promotional things of, because they did the high frame rate to help make the 3D look better back when everyone was like 3D is the future. And there's an image of like Peter Jackson with like the giant cameras they had to use, and he's sitting in like the director's chair and he's wearing 3D glasses.
Oh,
like while he's directing the scene. It's so weird.
Poor Peter Jackson.
And that's like him at the beginning where he's like, this is exciting, like as opposed to Battle of the Five Armies where he just wants to like die and all the behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, I can't. I haven't seen a single behind the scenes thing for that movie because I know it'll just depress me.
It's a funeral march. It's really depressing. And what's worse is that like they totally truncate like all the stuff Guillermo del Toro was working on. It was like he was here and then he left and then we had all this stuff that we had done and then Peter Jackson was like, I want to start from scratch. Yeah, a never-ending series of bad ideas.
That's so sad.
It's depressing.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's get to the last episode we have. Jet.
I think this is a fan favorite episode, actually.
Is it?
At least fan favorite character.
People like Jet.
People like you said, the bad boy.
I guess I never really liked Jet.
I like Jet, but not in the way I like Sokka, Aang, Katara. I kind of like him the way I like season 1 Zuko. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I find him compelling and sad, but he's not like someone I fanboy over, I guess, if that makes any sense too.
Yeah.
I don't like him like if he was like an actual person. I find the character compelling, I guess is what I'm saying.
Now that you say it, it totally makes sense that he's a fan favorite. He's got like a tragic backstory.
Oh yeah, no. When people say like Avatar anime ? This is like, oh yeah, this is anime.
Yeah, this is just.
He's also kind of got like this Robin Hood streak to him, but then the episode quickly veers into, oh yeah, he's a domestic terrorist.
Yeah, if Robin Hood was a domestic terrorist.
Yeah, child soldier domestic terrorism. That's what this episode has to offer. But I actually really like the narrative in the episode too, and that's like, yeah, Jet needs to be stopped and him and his cronies, but like, it's a really sad thing that this is where they feel that they have to go to because of the war, like it's they got pushed to this point. It's not like they woke up when they were kids and were like, let's do some domestic terrorism.
Well, this episode plays especially weird today with like what are the limits of fighting back, although we seem to be having we seem to be acting like people are like Jets right now.
Yeah, and that's like not the case
when they're destroying public property but aren't hurting people.
Yeah.
Whereas Jet wanted to flood an entire town full of women and children.
Yeah,
so
yeah, like difference.
There's a big difference. But I was just thinking, brought this up about him being a domestic terrorist Robin Hood. Especially stuff that definitely plays weird today. That whole story behind Ridley Scott's Robin Hood?
I actually don't. I just remember being very bored.
It's a bad movie. It's terrible. But it started as a script called Nottingham, and it was told from the perspective of the Sheriff of Nottingham. And it's this weird shift that kind of happened that, like, I think was a little subtler, and I think we're only now starting to, like, really evaluate it, where stories about crime and, like, murderers, like, I mean, you can see this all the way from, like, Zodiac to, like, The Highwaymen to, like, the original script for that Robin Hood film, where it's like, all right, now we're going to tell the story from the law perspective. And I mean, Zodiac is almost like, a horror slasher film, but told from the perspective of detectives and cops. And reporters a little bit. And like Mindhunter is that too, where it's like we get that, you get to have the creepy killer element, but it's also from the perspective of detectives. And that was the original script for the Robin Hood Nottingham, and then Ridley Scott came on board, and he's like, I want to do Robin Hood.
Why would you join that project?
I know. It was like, Nottingham is like considered like this great script. Like allegedly this script was like amazing. So like it kept getting, but they couldn't find anyone to do it. And then Ridley Scott wanted to do it, but he's like, I want to do Robin Hood. So then they tried to rewrite it where the Sheriff of Nottingham and Robin Hood were the same person. Like they did this weird rewrite where like the sheriff, like that's why Robin Hood's not getting caught because he's covering up his tracks. And then Ridley Scott was like, no, I don't even want to do that. I just want to do Robin Hood. And I also have a bunch of bullshit about the Magna Carta I want to put into it.
He's like a genuine crazy person.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah, no. But yeah,
he was knighted.
I know. Sir Ridley Scott.
What a king.
He's an interesting film. Hey, you know what? When it works, it works.
Yeah.
Or when it doesn't work, it's The Counselor, which is amazing.
No, The Counselor is when it swings back into working, and anyone who doesn't get that movie doesn't understand art.
Yeah, but when I say it like doesn't work, I mean like it works in a way that was not intended by anyone making it.
It might be intended by Cormac McCarthy, but that's a whole other discussion.
Well, yeah.
Because
he was pulling a prank on Ridley Scott.
Yeah.
But yeah. But maybe we got to do a Ridley Scott thing one of these days, unfortunately.
You know what? I think The Duelist is kind of underrated.
There's just like huge swaths of his career where it's like, Jesus. Like,
I know.
Where it's like
even me, who's like Alien Covenant, Prometheus, there's like that 2000 stretch, and I'm like, maybe it's not worth it.
Well, there's always like the people who are like, we want you to do Gladiator again, and he does Kingdom of Heaven, which rules.
Yeah,
but then he does shit like Gods of Egypt, which is just trash.
No, he no. That was Exodus. He did Exodus, Gods and Kings.
Who gives a shit?
Gods of Egypt was done by Alex Proyas, everyone's favorite Facebook critic.
Yeah, the guy who did Dark City and then lost it on Facebook.
Yeah.
Do you remember Roger Ebert like went to bat for like Dark City so hard?
No, actually. I know I went to bat for Dark City.
Roger Ebert gave like this glowing review of Dark City, and then for like the next like few years, anytime he reviewed a movie, he'd be like, it's trying to do what Dark City did, but failing entirely. It doesn't capture the majesty of Dark City. Like, to the point where he gave a very negative review. Like, I wouldn't say very negative. He gave a negative review of the first Matrix movie. He was not a fan of it. And in it, he's talking about, like, I prefer Dark City.
Oh, man. I miss you, Ebert.
And another guy who did that, I can't remember what the movie... Who's that Armand White? Remember him?
Oh, everyone's favorite.
Yeah, he was a huge defender of Spielberg's AI, and you can find all these reviews from around that time, because I went down this Armand White, like, rabbit hole a few years back.
So sorry.
And he would review a movie, and he'd be like, this movie's trash, and it's not like AI, and then the review would just be about AI. Like,
I know people like him for shit posts, but, like, no,
he sucks. He really sucks. Yeah. He writes for the National Review now. He really sucks.
Yeah. Come on, guys.
But hey, what are you gonna do?
Anyways,
he's Jet.
No,
and Roger Ebert's Aang.
No. I think it is an important discussion to have about like how media has kind of told these stories about like how far is too far. You know, like I liked that Jessica Jones Netflix series, but then the last season devolves when it like kind of becomes like spoiler alert for Jessica Jones, I guess. I know no one watched that last season except for me and like two other people anyways. But like her friend Hellcat, which she finally becomes Hellcat, but then she kills like the previous antagonist of the season who's a serial killer, and then the final like episode has to be like, I have to stop my friend who killed a killer, so she's just as bad as her as the other killer.
Yeah.
And it's like that's not the same thing at all.
I blame Batman. Everyone's trying to do the Batman thing. Like it works with Batman, but it doesn't work with anyone else. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's this thing where I think it works a little better here because it's literally like, hey Jet, yeah, we should stick it to the Fire Nation, but we should probably draw the line at beating up old men. And then even then you could be like, all right, maybe in the moment shit just got a little out of hand, and we don't know. He's still Fire Nation, but then we really draw the line at flooding a town full of men, women, and children who are all civilians.
Yeah, because then there's that image after like they blow up the dam, like where the doll is floating down the river. And before it reveals that the town survived, that's a pretty strong image.
I know. That was nuts. I totally forgot that. But I think the problem is that what it has become in this neoliberal hell we live in is that the idea that, like, if you even move in that direction, you're just as bad as, like, the ultimate end result. Like, you know, if you go, hey, we should stop the Fire Nation, and then it's like some asshole's like, oh, are you saying we should kill Fire Nation babies?
Yeah, I know.
And it's like, no, like, I have a problem with the Fire Nation.
Yeah. Or, you know, like, when someone, like, criticizes Joe Biden, they're like, well, then why don't you go, like, vote for Trump and suck his toes? And then you're like, whoa,
like,
what?
No way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it's also, like, it's the thing that, like, racists really latch onto, where you're like, white supremacy is bad, and they're like, oh, are you saying all white people are bad? And it's like, dude, no, but, like, fucking get a grip, like...
Like, you're trying to have a conversation about a very real subject, and they pull, like, the ultimate strongman argument, like, in 180 degrees away from the point you're trying to make, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think it's just, I think, again, sorry, I did not plan this, but to bring back 9/11.
Yeah, I figured.
I think it's really made us fearful of, like, radicalism in any form. Like, it doesn't even have to matter what what people are being radicalized by, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Or even, like, you know, radicalization just means, like, oh, I'm going to go to a protest. Like, which, like, now that's considered, like, a radical act. But, it, like, you know, we equate everything with, it's like, oh, if you get radicalized, the only way this can end is with terrorism. And it's like, no. It's like, that's not how that works. And I also think that's part of our nation's just failure to really grapple with why 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've been so, like, with, like, Bush even, like, you know, only using, like, really racist dog whistles against Muslim communities. But he mainly was like, you know, Islam, it's a religion of peace. What Al-Qaeda hates is our freedom. Like, that, remember that was, like, the whole thing for a while?
Yeah, and even that's still like, no, dude, what?
It's like, that's not even close to what's happening. And I mean, it's on both sides, where it's also like the atheists, you know, kind of go like, oh, the problem here is religion. And it's like, I think if you get rid of religion, it's not going to get rid of terrorism.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it might be a little cynical to suggest that, but I don't, you know, the religion is just like what was used to justify it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty, and we've learned recently that you can use plenty of stupid fucking things, like QAnon or something, to justify any ridiculous act you're doing. And that's why, kids, you don't flood a town full of children.
Yeah, basically, if you harm a child, I think you give up the right to your life. Like, that's kind of where the line is drawn for, like, humanity, I think. Like, if you hurt a kid, again, like, that's it. You're dead. And
again, that brings us back. Remember, like, in the fucking debates last year, they were like, would you go back in time and kill baby Hitler? Like, that was an actual question. And it's like, dude, that's not why Hitler happened. But, like, that's how we think of things. And I think, like, I feel the ground shifting. I mean, I guess, you know, that's not true. The ground is shifting huge. The problem is that enough people are, like, digging their heels in and are being like, nope, everything is fine. As the, like, ocean just rises around them. And, like, they're trying to, like, drag us with them. And, like, that's what's happening right now.
Well, if they acknowledge that the ocean is rising, then the stock market goes sad and the Dow go down.
I punch my numbers into my calculator and it makes a happy face.
Yeah. And right now, the problems in the world are trying to get me to acknowledge that it would make a sad face. But as long as people die, smiley face happen. Because money comes to people.
I was raised my whole life to believe that if the stock market is good, everything else is good. And literally everything happening out my window right now shows that to be wrong. But I can't acknowledge that.
I mean, just like, I know people don't want to see movies about this era of human history, but like in 50 years, I bet you could actually make a good one, because how fucking perfect and awful, perfectly awful, mind you, is the situation where it's like, hey, nationalism and capitalism are literally like suffocating humanity.
Yeah.
We should change the way things are. And other people are like, no, I don't think that's true.
You know how a bunch of people watched Chernobyl and were like, the problem was communism.
Oh, okay. The same thing would happen there.
Yeah. Well, no, what I'm saying is, like, I don't want any Trump movies, but I think that there is something into evaluating exactly why the corona thing spun out of control in this country.
Yeah. There you go. Movies about this period I think would be okay. Trump could be a part of them, but he cannot be like the focal point of them.
I feel like that's going to be the problem where like the next 4 years, if Trump is defeated and things kind of right themselves for a little bit, it's going to be, we're going to dogpile everything onto him and his administration. Mm-hmm. And like that'll be a problem. But I mean, because we kind of did the same thing with Bush.
Yeah.
And unfortunately now it's come back around to now we're like, actually Bush is cool. Like,
yeah, if you're trying to be cool with Bush, I think you should get socked in the mouth.
Yeah, you're really wrong on that one, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean,
that is Lord. Just like, you're a moron. If you say that, I want you to understand that. And you don't have to be. Just don't say it.
Well, I mean, literally what we found out is that it's like literally Trump just started hurting people that we actually give a fuck about, which are white people. Like, yeah. White, straight people, because, you know, Reagan let the AIDS crisis happen, but no one gave a fuck about the gay community for a while. But then once it started affecting non-gay people, everyone was like, it's a crisis. It was the horrible history of this country. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, like, the white majority is finally, like, starting to crack.
Yeah, but, I mean, like, the fact that protests are still happening, like, over 50 days in is very depressing, but also, like,
no, that makes me very happy.
No, I mean, like, it's sad that we've gotten to the point where it's a necessity, is my sadness for it, right? But it's great that it's not slowing down.
Yeah, I think my alternate take is that I believe that I believe what's happening now, other than maybe arson, I feel like that should be the natural state of this country at all times. Like, we should always be as angry as we are right now. Because, like, that's France. France gets, like, it's like France will be like, we're getting rid of 3 vacation days, and then they, like, blow up, like, a government building. Like, where it's here, it's like, hey, maybe don't kill people, and, like, that's the thing that's, like, freaked everyone out. Like,
or like, I like this. This is the one quote from Trump I'll ever say I actually like, where he's like, you know, police are killing more white people too, and everyone's like, oh, so you agree the police are killing people, and that's a problem?
Like, yeah, you fucking idiot. Yeah. Well, that's like my favorite one, where he was like, this. I mean, he's talking about the fucking wall. And he's like, there's going to be a great wall. There's going to be no way to get over the wall. What are they going to do? They can't go around. I mean, maybe a ladder. Like, and it's like, dude, it's like right there. You just casually threw out a thing that undercuts your whole argument. Yeah. And yeah, this is a fucking. And again, it's like the other thing that's happened recently is that like, oh, like there's already like 6 executive orders in place that are stopping statues from being torn down. Stupid. And it's like, hey, what about coronavirus? Like, all the nurses are going broke. Like, what the fuck, dude?
Well, you know, if the statues don't get torn down anymore, there's nothing against blowing them up. I'm just kidding to the government agent listening to this and combing through this from the FBI. But that would be funny, though.
You think if the agent that's listening to this was like, I gotta check Avatar: The Last Airbender for subversive messages, and then he has to watch it, but then he's like, oh, maybe I am on the wrong side. Is that too much to hope for?
Probably. Yeah. But I do think some people can be changed. You know, like there's those reports. We should really get back to The Last Airbender. But first there were like reports of like police officers like turning in their stuff and being like, I can't be part of this anymore. When this all started going down, that's kind of cool, you know? I mean, it wasn't also like en masse, but that's kind of
there's that other thing of like, they've gotten so much overtime from the recent shit that now they can qualify for like huge pensions, so a lot of them are retiring right now.
Oh yeah, that too.
I mean, it's. I think most of the good cops were run out years ago.
I mean, like, Frank Serpico still gets, like, death threats from the New York Police Department.
He got shot in the face.
Yeah.
Like...
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah. And that was a thing that just happened, and we all moved on. What are you going to do? Except get out in the streets and start protesting.
Yeah, there you go. That's the one true lesson you should take away from this show, among the many others.
I really can't go out because of my immune system being all fucked up, but I'm kind of at a point where it's like, if more starts happening with like the Homeland Security stuff, I'm gonna like have to go out.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like the moment where it's like fuck it, like that is the moment. So get the fuck out there.
Yeah, fucking. Let's do some stuff that I can't say.
Yeah, let's just say the definite line is blowing up a dam to flood a town full of children.
Yeah, please don't kill children. Like, if you do, I think you should die.
I think it's pretty safe to say that is bad.
Yes.
Everything else we can debate off mic.
I agree.
Yep.
Anyways, so Katara... was swooning over Jet, but then she sees that Jet was actually like a really broken, damaged, angry human being who was lashing out to hurt innocent people, and so she couldn't stand that, and Aang didn't want to fight him, but Katara is the one that beats him, and it's...
Well, Sokka is also kind of the hero of this one.
Yes, he is, and again, because like, it's an interesting arc for him as a warrior, because his arc in this isn't to like gain victory by beating Jet physically, he saves a town full of people.
Yeah.
You know? And I mean, like, yeah, along the way, there are Fire Nation soldiers that get saved. But I think it's a valid point to say, like, there are far more innocent lives that were saved. So, like, it's... I don't know. If you're saving innocent lives along the way, I think that's a good point to kind of fall back on.
Yes.
And, yeah, so he wins by not fighting, by saving. And so that's cool. And, this is the first instance of Katara being, like, actively kind of, like, hit back by her optimism, I think, you were bringing up earlier. You know, like, her naivete kind of leads her to pain sometimes.
And we started this episode talking about an episode where it works in her favor, and this is one where it comes back to bite her in the ass, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's interesting.
Yeah. This is a good format.
It's entirely coincidental, though.
Yeah, no, it is, but it just goes to show, like, the evolution of the characters' stories in this. Like, it's constantly moving forward in an interesting way, and sometimes there's no easy answer, you know, because at this point, because Jet does return, like many people know, but at this point, he's not someone that they could kind of talk down, so they just kind of have to leave him frozen to a tree. I mean, like, you know, it's in the middle of like a warm forest, so it'll melt. He'll survive, but like, you know, they've done what they can, and it's kind of, even though they save people, it's still kind of a sad ending, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's great episodes.
Yeah, show's great. I'm excited to be. I was so excited I accidentally watched one more episode than we were supposed to.
Yep. And so the next 5 episodes we'll be talking about are The Great Divide, The Storm, The Blue Spirit, The Fortune Teller, and Bato of the Water Tribe. I think people have some opinions about The Great Divide, which we will get into. But Matt, where can the people find you?
I'm at EmperorOTN1 at Twitter.com.
And you can find me at the Diego Crespo, and check out the Waffle Press on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and Patreon, where you can get more of these episodes early, along with the first season of Happy Amblin' and a bunch of other cool stuff too. I don't know, more stuff will be coming out. This is going up in like a month, so I don't know. You'll see more stuff there. There's stuff there. Yeah, that's it. So this has been Avatar: Legend of the Last Retrospective, which is not actually our last retrospective. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
Well, depends on where the country goes in the next couple weeks.
Oh yeah, that's true. Or one of us could like die from like coronavirus. There's a lot going on.
That would not be great.
That would be very disappointing and depressing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like living.
I want the world to know I died full of anger and cursing everyone.
I mean, that's how I want to go.
Just want that out there.
All right. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We have been professionally unprofessional.